I think a lot of people in the real world either don't like sales or they know how hard it is. For me, sales was like, hey, I could dictate my schedule. I can work as hard as I want, make as much as I want. If land is a domain and a website is like a house that's built on the land.
How big of a sale was ice.com?
Yeah, so it was 3.5 million.
Oh my God.
Is I've always seen myself as a leader from the trenches, and I'm always willing to go out and do the things that most managers and leaders aren't willing to do. If you move from company to company every 2 years, then, that says a lot to employers. It's hard to have that passion all the time, but that's a habit that you need to form to have, is like being grateful and really passionate about what it is you're doing.
So tell us a little bit. Okay, so you went through this college experience. It really set you up well. You had 6 figures upon graduation, no debt, which is an accomplishment. Most people have god awful amount of debt when they graduate school, right? So walk us through. So when you graduated school and how many summers did you do? It was like 6 or 10 or something?
It was 8 summers. So I did, 5. I extended one fall college football season.
Nice.
Went to Europe after that, came back, sold books, and then I was full time, for 3 years afterwards. That's when I met my wife, Jen. She also sold books for 6 summers. So
cool.
Summers total. Yeah, I went to New Zealand, got married, and then we wanted to live somewhere in the Southeast, either, Jacksonville, Savannah, or Charleston. And we picked Jacksonville. And so, really at that point, I think, and kind of to your point earlier about why sales is because I think a lot of people in the real world either don't like sales or they know how hard it is. So people that are good at it, it is one of those things that people can respect it because like, hey, it's not an easy thing to do. So being good at something that most people either don't like or don't want to do is going to give you an advantage. And so for me, I wanted to kind of continue that opportunity. For me, sales was like, hey, I could dictate my schedule. I can work as hard as I want, make as much as I want. But then being able to parlay sales skills into leadership and management and really building something is what I wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of done with Southwestern in terms of building a sales organization. So really I was looking at financial planning and, medical device sales was pretty big at that time. And I looked at a lot of different industries like, like career placement planning, like headhunter type thing. But I didn't really want to be sitting there at a desk. At that point in my life, I wanted to be out and about. And so really I took, that to insurance and really just had the opportunity to kind of start building an organization in the Southeast. I had a lot of people I'd worked with that had sold books that I knew would want to, that I'd be able to recruit to come and work with me. And so just started selling insurance and built up an organization doing that and really just applied a lot of the same skills from selling books to selling insurance. I mean, the biggest difference though is that books are kind of more of a tangible product and insurance is kind of more of an intangible product. You're really buying kind of more of a peace of mind versus something that actually physically use. You can't really use like hey, I've got insurance coverage for the piece of paper, but it's really more about the peace of mind. So really being able to develop that skill was good because now I'd gone from learning to sell a tangible product to now an intangible product, which really rounded out kind of my sales ability. And then also having to recruit a different type of person. Instead of recruiting a college student, most of the people I was recruiting were out of college. They were a lot of times even older than me, recruiting and managing people that were older than me kind of helped, my experience as a leader and manager as well.
Absolutely. So, want to hear about a little bit of grit here and maybe some life lessons that you'd love to share that you maybe learned along the way and kind of how to figure out your purpose, because it sounds like you've got it obviously figured out at this point, but just to sum up what we've been chatting about, I think that the biggest thing is that if you want to write your ticket, if you want to basically do whatever you want to do, developing skills in order to do that is what you have to do. And a lot of times it is the more entrepreneurial sales skills. If you ever want to be in charge of your own schedule, run your own thing, whatever it is, whether it's medical, whether you're, a lawyer, whether you're in business, whether you're doing something else, an engineer, making prototypes, if you want to write your own tickets, develop those skills, right? Develop the mindset that you're going to need, the grit to start, as well as the, in general, skills of how to communicate interpersonally with other human beings in a way that they like to be communicated with, because that's what you got to understand. If you want to be successful, you've got to communicate with people in the way that they like to be communicated with, right? So that takes time to develop. So Brian, just curious here. So how did you figure out your purpose? If you had to say your purpose, what would that be? How'd you figure it out? Why that direction? direction, and how do you kind of live that out to where, you don't maybe get burnout with life or hate your job? Because the way it sounds, I don't think you hate your job, correct?
Well, no, not now. I mean, and I'll say this, it took me a long time to figure out the purpose that I have now. I mean, my purpose for so long up to that point was really wanting to put myself in a good situation financially, putting my family, wanting to grow a family was something that was super important to us. For me, I wanted to have a career, which at the time I was in insurance, I wanted to have a career where, I could make good money to support our family, our growing family, have a job that could support my wife, having the option to be a stay-at-home mom, which, is what she chose to do. Being able to make enough that they could go to private schools or we can live in good neighborhoods and that kind of thing. But also somewhat be able to dictate my schedule. I mean, obviously it still required a lot of time and travel at times. But at that point, that was really my purpose. I knew that I wanted something more. Like I knew I wasn't going to be selling insurance forever. I mean, insurance is a great product. At the same time, you don't get out of bed and be like, oh man, I can't wait to go, write 5 or 6 policies today. Like, things that, but I did a ton of reading. I loved the idea of doing something on my own. I kind of got into real estate at the time. So I liked having, even though it was with insurance, I knew it wasn't going to be a long-term gig, and I still worked for another company. So it wasn't mine per se. There was a lot of things about my schedule and things that I couldn't control within the company that I just knew I always wanted to work for myself in some capacity. I just didn't know what it was going to be. My wife and I, we had 3 boys at that point. So, we loved sports. I loved pouring into young people. So that was something that, my wife and I were super involved with youth group in our church. So that was something we knew was going to be a piece of the puzzle somehow, some way. But just reading, being around good people and continuing to, really grind at insurance and do as well as I could. And then, the real estate thing was something that was fun and exciting because, I did have complete autonomy, being able to find the house that I wanted to buy, find the tenants. So I would buy a house, fix it up, and then rent it out. So to have like an additional income stream. So I did that for a couple years. And then that's kind of when the domain thing, because I'd really kind of hit a point where the insurance business, where it was like, okay, I knew my passion for that industry was dwindling. So I really needed to find something that was going to be next. And, kind of talking about taking a chance earlier, like when at this point I was like mid to late 30s, and it's really, really hard to make a career change, especially something that's going to be totally different from what you've been used to, right? So you really have to kind of prepare for it and give yourself some time to be able to fully make that transition. So a friend of mine that had sold a few domains, and he had recently sold one for like $100,000, and I was pretty fascinated because again, I was super involved in real estate, and this was very similar because it's, if land is a domain and a website is like a house that's built on the land, there's definitely a lot of similarities between land and real estate. And I was having a chance to go in and broker the deal. I could do it from home, which was becoming more appealing at that point, working from home, being that we had young kids, and I didn't want to travel as much anymore. And brokering domains was a great way for me to do that. So I would just work a full day of insurance, come home, eat dinner, spend some time with the kids, and then go to my office for a couple hours and just, start reading up and learning and doing some domain deals for this one guy. I was just had really one client at that point. But just really kind of started building up my clientele. And then in 2018, that big sale of ice.com, that's really where that business took off.
How big of a sale was ice.com? Just curious.
Yeah. So it was 3.5 million.
Oh my gosh.
Was the 14th largest domain sale. And it was kind of crazy how it all worked out too, because it was the guy that I sold it for. I had helped him buy like a $2,500 domain name, and all of a sudden he calls me like a year and a half later with a $3.5 million domain he wants to sell. And we had it sold within 48 hours. Actually happened right over the 4th of July holiday. And so it was a pretty exciting time for sure.
That's crazy. Good for you. Good for you. So if you had to, if you were talking to a student on how to maximize college, what do you think are the biggest life lessons you've learned, maybe post-school or during school, when you're selling books, that you would recommend to anyone, regardless of goals, whether they want to go into sales or anything else, obviously? What are some of those biggest life lessons that you'd want to share?
Well, I would say the biggest philosophy that I have that I've learned that I feel like has given me such an advantage is I've always seen myself as a leader from the trenches. So if you ever want to get into leadership and management, I think a lot of times people see like, oh, well, once I get to management and leadership, I don't have to do any of the hard stuff anymore, right? They kind of see it as like management leadership is like, oh, I'm on easy street once I get there, right? But my mentality has been as a leader and a manager, I'm always still in the trenches doing the hard stuff with the people that I work with and manage. And I feel like that's one of the huge advantages I have, is where a lot of people over the years that have worked with me have respected me in that way. And the fact that I'm always willing to go out and do the things that most managers and leaders aren't willing to do, whether it's work shoulder to shoulder with them, doing, sales, or going out into the field. And, even my granddad, who back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, started and grew, a pie baking company, which is now like a $500 million company owned by Schwann's. He sold it back in the 80s. But one of the things as the CEO that he always did was like even getting out on the factory floor and going to have personal relationships with everybody that's working on the assembly line. And instead of sitting back there behind the mahogany desk, right, he's out there on the floor talking with people, seeing what's working, what's not, building relationship with those people. And so I think that's such a huge, important thing because a lot of times people see that management leadership is like, oh, well, now I don't have to do the hard stuff anymore. So I'd say for me, that's something that it's easy to get caught up in that. And it's hard to continue to do the hard things. But that's something that I think has really, really helped me. I would say keep going, persistence, so many people end up, I saw it a lot with selling books and insurance, is that where a lot of times people, when they get that first really, really tough thing that happens, they tend to want to quit. And really to get good at something, you have to put in time, the 10,000 hours, and typically in most careers, it takes about 18 months in order to really kind of find your groove in an industry. And a lot of people end up quitting before that 18 months is there. And, it just reflects in your resume, right? If you move from company to company every 2 years, then, that says a lot to employers. So I think just continue to keep going and persist. And again, ways to do that are being surrounded by good people, having good mentors that have been there for a while that help you get where they've been, reading good books, learning as much as you can, continuing to be a student of your industry. And then, the other thing I would say too is trying to really have a passion for whatever it is you're doing. Now, I can certainly say along the way, there were things that I did that I wasn't like super passionate about, not as passionate as I am now on what I do. But I think sometimes you have to learn to have that passion, right? So if you're going to work, in a sales job for a company, or going to work for, in IT for a company that does something, like really find a reason to be passionate about working for that company, about the product and the service that you sell. And I think, that's a great habit to form as far as finding, even like parenting. Like sometimes it's super hard to be passionate about parenting, but you need to find a way to do that, right? Even with being married, like, as I've been married for 17 years and, it's hard to have that passion all the time, but that's a habit that you need to form to have, is like being grateful and really passionate about what it is you're doing.
Can I ask you a follow up on that real quick? Because I think
Yeah.
people struggle with this a lot. Okay, I've seen tons of people struggle with this. This is a really good point. And how would you describe a process, right, to be grateful, content with what you have? Because there's a big trend in like Gen Zers where, for example, they feel really bad about how much money they make because they see everyone else making a lot of money on these different social media apps, for example. Like, how do you focus on contentment? What would be, if you're talking to an 18, 19, 21-year-old, what is your process for getting excited about something that's, maybe on the face of it, something we don't want to do?
Yeah. So, well, I guess first, having an attitude of gratitude is just something you kind of have to build into your daily routine. I mean, some people have like a gratitude list they read out. I'm not really great at journaling. I wish I was, but that's something that's helpful for people. For me, each day I kind of build into my day, like, I'll go walk the dog for like 2 miles and then I'll sit kind of in the backyard. I've got this Adirondack chair while the dog's, back there and it's dark. And so for me, just kind of having that quiet time alone, just being able to unplug, I think just having little, they always say being outside and walking in nature really. And for me, that works, of just being able to kind of step back from all the busyness and craziness that you're involved in and really being able to appreciate what you're doing. I think really limiting screen time and the types of things that you watch can certainly help with that. that, I mean, for the most part, a lot of social media is designed to create anxiety in people in order to get them to buy a product or watch a video or something else. So really being able to set up healthy guardrails where like, okay, obviously if you enjoy it, then watch it. But at the same time, you need to set healthy boundaries there. So I'd say those be a couple things that can help as far as with gratitude.
That's pretty awesome. So is there anything that you want to plug real quick?
No, check us out on YouTube as well, grit-org. We have like motivational videos, all of our podcasts, and more to come there as well.
Appreciate everybody. And of course, all of our links will be in the description, grit.org, all that kind of stuff, as well as all of our socials. So hopefully this was helpful to you. If you are interested in maximizing your college experience, we do invite you to come along the ride with me, Joe Ignace, and my co-host Nick, who couldn't be here on this podcast, but we'll be here in future episodes to subscribe and follow us. Thanks so much.